Hey guys, welcome to the show. Why don't we start by telling the folks at home who y'all are? So let's start with you, Carrie.
Hi, so my name's Kerry Mold. I am one of the writers with the Harn Writers Group. I've been doing Harn writing for about 20 years now. And my most recent article was the Kingdom of Azadmir update
Nice. That was the one that you guys were premiering at Gen Con this year
at
because
Gen Con.
that
Yeah,
was all
yeah.
over the booth there. Cool. And Richard, do tell, do tell.
All right, my name's Richard Lushek, and I've been the illustrator for Harn for over 20 years. I hate to say it, but and I've been playing Harn since high school. So, I discovered it in high school playing with friends. Actually, my seventh grade English teacher started a group after school, and we did the usual, played D&D, switched to a game called Dragon Quest, and then found Harn and been playing. I'm playing with that same group from that I started with in seventh grade
Wow.
next week. So we've had lots of campaigns over the years, and it's kind of surreal that I'm actually drawing for this
Yeah.
game. It's very bizarre how it all happened. And so I do that, and then I'd like to think that I do a little bit of shaking the tree at Columbia Games, a little bit like, hey, let's do this. We need to do this. And so, it's a small company, and I feel like occasionally I'm like, hey, let's do this, and you have to kind of get things wrangled a little bit. So
Right.
that's, but mostly I just draw the stuff.
Okay.
So, and then, try to maintain as much as I can from what I fell in love with Harn, which was the art that Eric Hotz was doing and all the great information that they had. So that's what I do.
Great. And Brent.
So I'm Brent Bailey. I am the de facto managing editor uh, for the Harn product line. So I don't work for Columbia Games. None of us do. We're all freelancers. But I manage the team that puts all this stuff together. So the writers, the illustrator, the map makers, that sort of thing. So I kind of manage the team, and I also do the like the layout and the editing of the articles. Um, Occasionally write and occasionally do some map making, but primarily it's the layout, editing, and management that is what I focus on.
And how long have you been doing that?
15 years
Wow.
or
So
so.
so all three of you are like old hats at this Harn game.
Yeah,
Yep.
I got involved with the team back in, I think it was 2005. Um, Started copy editing about a year later, and then took over managing the team in 2011.
Cool. So the reason why we're doing this, I mean, obviously, any chance I get to promote anything to do with Harn, I'm all over that because it's one of my favorite settings and probably my favorite game system. Out there with house rules, of course, because everybody's got to house rule their stuff. But the reason why we're doing this today is because Richard sent me a drawing that is going to be released in the Wulenheim article, I guess, coming up, which is an Avinian settlement it's in Avinia, isn't it? Wulenheim. It's not in Harn. It's in Avinia. Isn't that right? Yeah.
Right.
Right.
Yep.
So one of the characters in there was drawn to look like me, and so Richard sent this picture, which is a really great drawing of a really bad picture. So thank you for doing a great drawing of a terrible picture of me.
Oh, come on. Those were good photos,
Uh,
I thought.
well, like I said, they're great
You were
drawings.
hamming it up something. Yeah.
It's very appropriate. I certainly do look like a Viking. That's for sure in that period. So tell me about that process. I've noticed in all of the Harn stuff that you guys often have pictures of NPCs scattered across the various supplements that seem suspiciously like they're modeled after real people. So how much would you say in terms of like a percentage? How many NPCs are based on real people in terms of the drawings?
Um, Well, that's a tough question. I would guess it's not as big a percentage as you think. I mean, I like to have a good reference and just to make sure I get the accuracy of everything. And I'd say there's probably 20 to 30 actual Harn fans who have ended up in publications throughout, the years. And so, at Gen Con, I tend to take pictures of people when they show up to the booth. I'm like, hey, you want to, you know, and, I'm not to cast any, stones or anything, but, sometimes people are funny looking. And I think, you'd be great for this particular character. And so,
They'd probably prefer to be called interesting looking, I think, rather than
interesting.
funny
Yeah,
looking.
that's probably better.
Well,
I mean,
I'm honored to be.
most of them are self-aware.
That's true. That's true.
So.
Well, I'm horrifyingly self-aware. That's why I'm I'm able to praise your drawing and criticize my own appearance.
Well, the thing is that I think and I show I have a whole folder of stuff I haven't used just because they haven't been appropriate or whatever. But that character just popped up in Wallenheim, and I was like, hey, that seems kind of perfect.
So
you had a Viking look going on.
yeah,
so
well, it certainly works. So let me ask you about that. This first of all, tell us about the article and tell us about where it's going to appear, and I guess just generally how people can find those articles before we carry on.
So Wulenheim was originally published back in the 1980s as part of the Menglana Kingdom module. And that module, Columbia Games published many years ago and has been out of print for quite some time because it was, again, published back in the 80s and they didn't make PDFs or have electronic copies of the material back then. So our team over the last decade or so have been working to get a lot of that older material back in print and to make electronic versions available. So we did the Kingdom of Menglana a couple of years ago. I lose track, so I don't even remember when it was. And we've been doing some of the other articles that were in that module, some of the towns that were in it. We've been putting those out on a regular basis. And this time it's Wulenheim. So it's I believe it was the last of the components from that old module. And it will be available. So Columbia Games sells all their material in on article by article basis. So you can buy just individual articles, which Wulenheim will be available now. It's actually publishing right now and can be purchased through the Columbia Games website. And depending on when this is released, it'll probably be available on Drive-Thru RPG as well. We usually put them on Drive-Thru RPG about a week after they publish through Columbia Games.
Cool. Well, I'll put the link in the description below so people can find that for sure. What's interesting, I always find about the article system is that it makes Harn, in terms of a world, it makes it very accessible because you've got your main book, which covers all of the main stuff, the sort of the vital details that you need to run it. But then it's almost like an a la carte thing. You can here's an article on how to hunt, and there's all these optional rules about how to hunt. Or here's an article on a particular type of Ivashu, which is like a particular monster that's unique to Harn. And I don't see a lot of other worlds that are published that way. A lot of the time it's big, heavy hardback books and then another big, heavy hardback book. But I kind of like that about Harn, that it's more accessible and more easily digestible almost. You can pick and choose, and a lot of people do also. They take articles and they use it in their own worlds, right? Because there's so many valuable things, whether it's the art or the supplemental rules or whatever the case is. So, Carrie, you said you're one of the principal writers. Is that right? Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, no, I've been writing for the Harn Writers Group since about 2004. So just coming up on 20 years. I've done a number of major articles. I wrote the most recent adventure that was released, On the Edge. And I've also was the lead author among a team of authors who did the Kingdom of Azadmir, which is the most recent Kingdom module that was printed in hardback. And so we've been working we have a team that it varies in size from about 6 to 10, depending on who's working on what articles at any given time. And we try and get 32 pages, be that mix of articles. Sometimes it's a 32-page article. Sometimes it's 4 8-page articles, depending on the quarter. We try and put out 32 pages every 3 months. And so different authors take different articles, and sometimes the development period can be long, depending on how much research you do and how much development there is in each article. But we put those together, and Brent is our fearless leader. He coordinates between all the different writers and make sure that the articles are finished on time and can be edited and art done for them and delivered every 3 months. So it's been a really fun process, over the last 20 years. We've got a lot more proficient at it, I would say, as a group, and we've got our process down pretty good. One of the exciting parts I find about Harn is that when I started, we were basically renewing and updating the previous articles that had been released only in paper, right? So the first round of Harn publishing was in the early 80s, and most of that was only published just in paper version. And those have been getting progressively more difficult to find over the years.
I have
So
every copy of everything ever published, just for the record. It's all in the library.
And I do too, at great expense. Thank you, Crazy Igors, for some of them, and eBay. So a few people in eBay made a lot of money off me. But I have the whole collection. But the thing is, it was very difficult to find some of those articles. And so what we've been doing over the last 20 years is renewing, updating those articles, expanding them, adding more detail, developing individual locations within larger articles. And over the last 20 years, we've almost completed all of them. There's a few minor ones left still to do, but we're in the process of finishing those off. And now all of the previously released articles are now available in PDF. So like you said, you can go to Columbia Games or to Drive Through RPG, and you can pick and choose which articles you want. One of the things we recommend to folks is Harn World is kind of the overarching article, and it tells you kind of a little bit about everything, but not a lot. And then you can kind of pick and choose from there and buy specific articles depending on what interests you.
And all of the new books, they've all been updated, not just with information, but also with new art and color plates as well. Is that correct?
Yeah, so a big part of this is we've colorized all the maps. So all the maps have been redone electronically and colorized. And then Richard, in about the last 10 years, we've switched over from black and white art to color art. And probably about 60 to 70% of the art in our articles is color. A lot of the portraits of individuals are black and white, but all of the sort of location images that show kind of the overview of the location and key buildings and stuff like that, those are all done in color.
So are there any of the old art pieces that exist as they were, or has everything been replaced? Because I'm thinking about the original versions of the books, and the art was all very, very medieval in style, very, very sort of wood cut in style. Is any of that still there, or has all of that been sort of updated with more modern looking stuff?
I'd say mostly it's getting redone. I mean, I we do keep some hot stuff in there, and some of the more iconic ones we do. And I just think I would say just the style of the way things have gone. It's just trying to keep a consistent look through the books. We have been mostly replacing stuff. So and I've been redoing. We did all the covers. We redid all the covers, and so a lot of them. I tried really hard to pay homage to the hot stuff, and sometimes just basically redid them so they all kind of matched. Because he did some really wonderful. I mean, it's kind of what drew me to the game. As part of it was all the art was very different from, the very over the top flashy D&D stuff with and his stuff had felt like a world that was lived in. And I still marvel at his early castle drawings, because the castle drawings are just based off flat maps. And what I do, my process is I build a 3D computer model of every single location, and then turn it around so I can light it and figure out, so I can get the perspectives right. And Hotz didn't have that. I don't know what he was doing, but I'll do them, and I will find some things that aren't 100%, but you would never know unless you had the model that it was not quite right. And he nailed it quite often. And I'm like, wow. I mean, he really got the perspective right on some of these. But yeah, most of them are being redone, and so just so they all kind of match and gives a nice thematic style to the whole thing. But I'm trying to keep the flavor of what Harn has always had.
So this is the original HOTS cover for Caldor. And then this is
Wow.
what Richard did for it's a little
Yeah.
bit of a thing, but you can catch the same, you have the same flavor. You have the pointed tents, and you have the knight and his squire, and it's just been kind of updated and modernized
That's
for the
cool, and
modern
it's
day.
great. I mean, I love having both of those covers because the original one is very, it's very Bayeux tapestry almost. It's got that very, very almost 2D, really medieval feel to it. And then Richard's new stuff is far more modern and more colorful and just more kind of visually dynamic as well. But it still preserves the original concept, which is great. So speaking of consistency, so Brent, as sort of the head honcho editor type fella there, because Harn is a world in which each individual GM can dial up or dial down the fantasy, right, as much as they want. When you get submissions from writers, how much is contingent upon your judgment to determine what goes in and goes out when it comes to stuff like that? Like, and I don't know if this happens, maybe you have a very small team, but is there ever situations where someone submits something to you and you feel, oh, you know what, this is maybe more appropriate for a super high fantasy world than necessarily what Harn might be? Are those calls that you make? Do you run into that stuff?
Yes, we run into that all the time. That, as Carrie mentioned, we've got the team that there's probably half a dozen to a dozen regularly active members, and then there's some people who are a little less so. And we as a group review everything. So it's not just down to me that when someone does write something and they're posting their drafts on our private website, everybody can look at it and give their 2 cents. We want everybody's input on those, and we look for that sort of thing. That is the feel for this right? There in the past, I think we're doing a better job of it these days than there may have been at some points in the past. That some things have gotten in there that when I look back, it's like, ooh, I wish we wouldn't have done that, or I wish that hadn't have gone through. But by and large, we do a good job because we've got a fairly broad group of people that know the Harn world setting well and have decades of experience with it. And so we pretty much have a good gut feel for, is this appropriate for the setting, just in the general vibe, the general feel of it. We also, as you would expect with the vast amount of material that's out there about the setting, the canon checking, the canonicity of these things, that, are we being consistent, not just with the feel, but with the facts? That, have we named a person over here and then name the position, but forget that we already named the person, and that sort of thing? That do two different articles give different names for the abbot of a certain abbey? It's we have to be very careful about that sort of thing. And we used to have a dedicated canon checker who, real life has, now made it so that he's no longer involved, but he had a very comprehensive mind of what all had been published, and he would remember little facts that and just was really good at finding that stuff. And with him gone, it's now become more, I've taken on a lot of that, but we rely on the team to also remember, to do that research. And it's become a little bit of a burden on the writers too, that it's like, well, hey, don't just give me your ideas, do your research and, come to us with that. And, we do get not necessarily submissions from outside the group, but we do have people from outside the team that have expressed an interest in contributing, in writing. And we don't take just you write it and then send it in. It's like, no. You send me a draft, people will review it, we'll get back to you, that we make it more of a collaborative process. And, and I tell prospective writers up front, this is how it works, that what you write isn't going to be what's published, that this is going to go through a group. It's, we're going to make sure that this fits the feel, fits the language, fits the facts of the setting. And some people, that's the last I hear of them. They decide that's not what they want, that they decide, nope, I'm more of a lone wolf. I don't want to be part of the group. I'll just go and, publish mine as a fanon article, a fan publication, not under, Columbia Games. And, that's perfectly fine for them to do that. But, we as a group, we really want to be consistent. And, I know Carrie and I have talked about this in the past that, because we try to make the product line relatively consistent, there's an element to that of consistency in approach, consistency in language and style. And not all of the writer, everybody writes differently. And I think that, over the years, as my confidence level has increased, my hand has become a little heavier. I think Carrie will agree on that I don't hesitate to change people's language. It's not just your writing is what gets published. It's no, that's not how we normally do things. That, so when you read these Harn articles and you read you can look at the credits and see who the writer is. But for the most part, you'll be hard pressed to really notice, oh yeah, this one was written by this person and this one was written by this person, because we do, consolidate or have a kind of a house style to language and presentation so that there is that consistency.
Yeah, and that certainly comes through. I think you're totally right, because when you do look at any of the especially the sort of more modern stuff, it does feel very, very consistent. And that must be a nightmare, and I can see the need for a canon checker. That must be a nightmare. You'd have to have an encyclopedic knowledge of everything Harn in order to do this, because as you say, you have to be checking names and dates, and because all of that stuff matters to people who like Harn. They want this consistent history. They want this consistent setting. You don't want to be going to the Vulenheim article and it talks about a different Valakar or something that was mentioned in the main Avinia module. So that alone must be crazy. But
one of the things I would say is thank God for PDFs, because the PDFs, like 95% of all of our material is now on PDF, and it's searchable. So you can, when you're looking for something on a specific person or whatever, I have all of my Harn material in one master directory, and I can search all of that and find every instance where that name was mentioned, and then go to each article and check and see. It doesn't solve everything. If you have a very common term like Lorani, I mean, it's everywhere. And so trying to track that down is more difficult, and you have to know the material. But it does help with things like names specifically, because you can look up and see where that person was named in other articles.
It's interesting. You talk about the consistency of feel in terms of what Harn is, and I've always found it fascinating. Maybe you guys could talk about this, that, Harn was presented back in the 80s as, I remember the ad in Dragon magazine. It was Harn, where the fantasy is real. And it was like, okay, this is a really grounded, low fantasy thing. And of course, yes, there was still dragons and undead and all kinds of monsters and stuff, but it always had this idea that this was a real kind of low fantasy, very almost like, I would say these days, like a Game of Thrones early books kind of environment where it's very, very grounded. However, when you look at what I guess were among the first published adventure modules for Harn Master, which were written by Robin, the creator of Harn, they were these crazy high fantasy world-spanning adventures. Like, I think in the first one, you spend like 10 minutes in Harn and then you go through a portal to some other plane. I'm like, what? What happened to that?
And those were articles that were written by Robin based on his own personal campaign. And so they're ones that have not really been relevant as much to the greater Harn creation. So, newer Harn adventures, especially the last few that have been released, have been much more grounded in the world and less dimension hopping, less world hopping than what Robin had written. Not that that's bad, and I mean, one of the huge advantages that Robin brought to the world was the Earthmasters. So the Earthmasters are an ancient species that built a bunch of, for lack of a better term, transporters on Harn, and species and people from other worlds can kind of fall through these transporters and end up in Harn. And it's a great way to move characters if you have an existing campaign, have them transported through this mysterious arch that all of a sudden they arrive in Harn, and many things will come from that. But it is, that there's different levels of fantasy, and the great part with Harn is you can dial that up. You can have powerful magicians if you want, or you can dial that back. The way that the articles are written, it's very much up to the GM to choose their level of high fantasy. And if you want to, like for example, the Dwarven Kingdom and the Elven Kingdom are both very insular. So if you don't want to have dwarves and elves in your campaign, you can either have them as human kingdoms, or the elves and dwarves kind of died out, and these are now spaces that you can go to and explore the ruins of their former civilization. So it's very much set up that way on purpose, and we try and maintain that all the way through to give the GM that freedom to go big or go small when it comes to fantasy and magic.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things that does set the setting apart from so many other ones is that, especially if you look at, let's take the big one, Forgotten Realms, right? Forgotten Realms itself went through many, many versions. It's a far cry these days from what Ed Greenwood originally released way back in the day. I still think the first edition is the best because it's mostly empty. It's just the old gray box is mostly empty. But Forgotten Realms had a very classic D&D feel to it. Had a very sort of high fantasy feel to it, and especially these days. I mean, these days you walk down the streets of Waterdeep and you're going to see half demons and elephant men and what the hell, like it's a menagerie. What happened to the Forgotten Realms? It's a menagerie now. Whereas like it's built in, that kind of high fantasy thing is absolutely built into the Forgotten Realms. It's much harder to extract it from the realms. But with Harn, it's very easy to add it. It's very easy. The setting is such as that it's super simple to drop in. I don't know, a crazy monster attack on the village or something, because it's much harder to take it out than it is to put it in. So I think that was a smart design decision on that. So in terms of, do you guys work on the game system as well, Harn Master, or you focus mostly on the setting, or do you do both, or how does that work?
We mostly work on the Harn world setting. That the Harn Master rules have been pretty much as they are now in the third edition for quite some time. I can't remember if it might have been 2009 might be the copyright date on Harn Master third edition. We do strive to kind of keep some separation between the setting and the rules. That if most of these setting articles have little to no rules in them, or rules that are specific to Harn Master 3. That like you mentioned, Trevor, the hunting article. Well, that hunting article does have quite a bit of rules in it, because it's rules for how to resolve hunting. And those are based on some of the mechanisms in the Harn Master rules, but they're by and large, it's all percentage based and skill based. And so you can quite easily translate that over to other rules. So we try to keep some separation between them. There is going to be some that bleeds in, but the team itself does not actively do anything with the Harn Master third edition or the Harn Master rules. So if Columbia Games was going to have a fourth edition of Harnmaster, certain people from the team might be involved in that project. Whether or not it would be a project for the team, that I don't know. It has never come up that way. But Columbia, the one really good thing is that Columbia Games has kind of said that, yeah, anything that we're going to do with the Harn products, we will involve the team. So, like I mentioned earlier, that when people do express an interest in writing, some people do email Columbia Games and say, "Hey, I want to write for you. What do I do?" And Grant and Tom at Columbia Games basically just reply to them saying, "Go talk to Brent," and then I bring them up to, I go through all that. So I would like to think that, yeah, if there is going to be a Harnmaster fourth edition, that this team will be involved in some way of in doing that.
And I think it's important too, especially for the people maybe watching this video of my viewers, that it's very important to distinguish Harn the setting from Harnmaster the game, because they are two different things. You do not need to use them both.
Right.
You can, and I do, and it's obviously designed to be more integrated, obviously. However, there's been a million people that have used all kinds of other game systems in the Harn setting. It doesn't matter. It's system agnostic. It's system neutral. You can use any game system you want. Harnmaster is just the very simulationist style percentage-based game that is designed specifically to work within the Harn setting, but you don't need it. Although, like I said, it's my favorite game. So,
and the other thing too, I would say, is that you don't necessarily have to use Harn World to use Harn World articles, right? I came to Harn. My very first Harn purchase was Cities of Harn, which came out in like 1983. And I used the 7 cities that were in that article or that book for every D&D campaign that I ran when I was 16 years old, right? That every city that you came to, I just pulled out the next
yeah,
city in the Harn book, and
yeah,
there it was. And that's one of the things that you can do as well, is if you need a city, if you need a castle, if you need a small village, you can purchase those specific articles and drop them into your campaign. And what we hope is that after people have read through a few of those, they're like, "Hey, this place seems really cool. Let's explore the actual Harn world." But we like Harn brings a lot of different options. You have, for example, in both the Ivinia and the Orbal areas, you have a very Viking feel. So if you're running a kind of a Viking campaign, it's got long houses with long ships and warboats and all that sort of stuff, and you could drop that into a campaign set in Norway or Sweden or something like that. And then if you want a traditional castle, you're running something in a for example, medieval Britain, you could drop in one of the castles from Harn, and you've got a very Norman feeling castle that you can, it can be Nottingham, it can be Essex, it could be anywhere you
right.
want, right?
And speaking
So,
of cities and castles, so Richard, do you do all of the art, including city maps and everything, or is
I don't
it?
do maps. There's a designated mapper, a couple mappers, and yeah, I will only do maps if they're like of a poetic style, like a map that looks like a player would be handed, and I'll draw those out so it looks medieval. But generally, they use, what most people are using Illustrator these days to kind of. We have some set up, uh, you know. Ready to use textures and all that stuff to make the maps all look consistent. And so we have mappers that do all that. And generally they're based on old maps, and then the new maps are just, usually the writer hand draws something and hands it to the mapper, and they map on, they develop the map on top of that. And then I'm handing the map, and then I have to draw, a few scenes that look like
Right,
they take
because
place.
it's quite a different set of skills, isn't it? To be drawing a map versus drawing, portraits or such.
Yeah.
I say this as a complete
Yeah.
ignoramus when it comes to art. I can't even draw a straight line, so I know nothing about it.
Well, that's kind of how I see it. Like I mentioned at the beginning, that I do a little bit of map making, and I don't consider myself at all a creative, artistic person. I can't draw at all, but I can use Adobe Illustrator to draw maps because it's shapes. It's more of a mechanical. I don't, I'm not taking away anything from like somebody who can really do well done artistic maps. Great. The kind of maps that we're doing are more schematic. They're more mechanical. They're less artistic or interpretive. But it is, so like you said, it's two different skill sets, and we do have a number of people who do our maps, and I everybody they're all good. That's the thing, that these maps are consistent because, like Richard said, that we have a palette of shared templates and styles and textures and objects, and so you're just kind of putting all the pieces together and coming up with the maps.
And I want to talk about the fans as well, because I know that there's a very, very, very dedicated active fan base on the website that I frequent, whose name totally escapes me now. That's it,
Lithia.com.
Lithia.com, where I presume, in fact, Carrie, I'm pretty sure I've seen your signature on there many, many times. But there's a hugely dedicated fan base for Harn and all things Harn. How much of those people that are active on there creating like the fandom articles and things like this, how many of those people get elevated to actually writing official material from Harn? Like, how does that? What's the size of your sort of official writing team and creative team?
I mean, I'd say currently everybody, right? I mean, everybody who's working for Harn, like in the 90s, was a Harn fan that just, when there was kind of that lull in publishing. And, it all, and, I mean, I think most of us would say the father of the resurgence was Patrick Nilsson, a Swedish guy who really became active and was a very loud voice on the initial forum. And he sort of assembled a group and was forced his way into Columbia Games and says, let's start doing more stuff. And so, a lot of the people in the early days, Carrie is the other, I would say, we have Patrick and Carrie were the two main big ones writing what looked like Harn level articles, quality articles. And the interesting thing is that's how I got sucked in, is that Patrick started hiring me to do work for his own personal gain. And then Carrie started, hiring me to do stuff. And then the next thing I know, Patrick is working for Columbia Games, and he's like, hey, we're doing this stuff. Why don't you start working for Columbia Games? So I just slid over. I think, so I was a fan working, doing my own stuff, and we all just kind of slid in, I think. And that's how generally it happens. I don't think we're not recruiting from non-Harn playing groups of people. It's everybody.
I think that almost
fan.
everybody, I think there may be one or so that, have contributed fandom work before they become part of the team or before they do work that is published by Columbia Games. And that's, as I mentioned earlier, when somebody contacts myself or Columbia Games and said they're interested in writing, in the introductory email that I send them, when I explain the process and all, one of the things I say is, prove yourself, publish some fandom work. Let's see, propose a project, finish the project, show us what you can do. It's not trying to be gatekeeping or exclusionary, but it's, everybody on the team has done that. And, you've got to get a feel for the work, to get a feel for what it means to write. It really helps if you've done it yourself and not just, well, join the team and then you tell me what to do. It's like, no, go, we'll help. There are many people on the team, people on the Harn forum that will help you. But, it really helps if you work through a project on your own and can show that you can do the research and that you can show that you're, where your head is with this, that then it helps us know, yeah, you're going to be a really good contributor for this team.
And that's the same in any artistic endeavor where you go from amateur to professional. It's always the same. Everybody wants to I mean, the dream for the gamer, right, is to, oh, well, I love this game. I've been playing it. Now I get to write for the company. Huzzah! Isn't that great? We see that all the time. We see it like in what I do, voice acting. Everybody and their dog thinks they can be a voice actor. And, well, I do a really great Bart Simpson. Well, they've already got one of those. So, we're going to have to do a little better than that. So there's always that jump. When I started writing for Marvel, it was the same thing. It was, okay, it is very much a team thing. You submit your draft of the script, and then it goes through a whole process where all the executives and everybody tears it apart, and they throw it back at you and say, here's the changes. And you can't take that personally. It's just the way it is. They, like you, are trying to keep things consistent because they have a brand and they have standards that they're trying to maintain. And I think a lot of people who don't come at this from a professional mindset, they don't understand that, especially if you're talking about an RPG, because, hey, it's a game, right? Hey, we're all just having fun, and it's our passion, and that's all fine and good, but it's also a business.
So the three big things that we ask of all of our writers is you have to be able to complete a project on time. You have to be able to give good criticism to other people, and you have to be able to accept criticism from the other writers gracefully and be able to take that and go back and fix your article. Because and like I said, I've been doing this. My first fanon release was in 2001, so I've been doing this for 22 years. Every single article of mine goes through all the other writers, goes through Richard, goes through Brent, and everybody has comments. And sometimes, things that were your babies, that you put in there and you think are great. Other people are like, that's crap.
Yeah.
It's got to come out. And if you can't accept that, that's one of the reasons, honestly, why I still write fanon, is because fanon is not official. So you can put in the things that maybe wouldn't quite fly in the official material. You can put them in your fanon article and release them. And if people like them, they can use them. If they don't like them, they don't have to use them. But when we're putting stuff into official publications, we have to consider the entire, canon, all of the books that have been previously released, the tone, the level of fantasy, all that has to be considered. We want to keep, as Brent mentioned, we want to keep the same voice. We want to stay the same style. And so you can't just suddenly go off and introduce a 14-story round castle with dragons perched on it and all that sort of stuff. It just doesn't fit with the rest of the material. And so you have to be willing to subordinate yourself to the overall requirements of the team.
Yeah. It's just the way it works.
Well, the other
Yep.
thing, and the other thing I will say is I think we're pretty good. I think most of us pay attention to the fanon pretty hard. I mean, we download the articles, we read them, we use them in our games. And one of the things I do think happens once in a while, we'll be republishing an article that someone did fanon on. And we actually will, if the stuff is good, we'll use it. And if I'm illustrating an article and someone else has already done it, and maybe they've drawn some of their own kind of hand drawn stuff, or they hired another artist to do it or whatever, I look at that art and try to, I don't I'll wholesale change it if I don't like it, but I pay attention to it, and I'll draw the same jewelry that I see in the fan article stuff if they're wearing something. And we do pay attention to it if the stuff, and often the fan stuff is good because, I think generally smart people play Harn.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. And it sounds a bit too like the fanon stuff is almost like the farm team for the Columbia Games
Right.
writer team,
Exactly. Yeah. If someone gets hurt, we'll call someone up from the B squad. Yeah.
Up from the minors.
Right.
Yeah, and that's
So what is what's in store? What's in store for the Harn fans out there from you guys? What's coming out that you can talk about that they can look forward to?
so back earlier, late summer, I guess it was, when it was after Carrie had done, or after we had worked on the Kingdom of Azimir, the dwarves, and Columbia Games was going to do the Kickstarter for the Kingdom of Azadmir hardback book. Um, Grant from Columbia Games had emailed me and said something about so one of the Kiraz, the Kingdom of Kiraz, is a ruin. It's a dwarven ruin that Columbia published an article about Kiraz decades ago, and it was one of those that was out of print. So there was no electronic version. You had to, scrounge for print copies on eBay or whatever. And Grant had asked about. It was like, wow, it would really be nice to have an electronic version of that, an updated version of that. That we could use as a stretch goal for the Kingdom of Azadmir hardback. And, I said, well, sure, we can put it on the list, but it's not going to be done in time for, the Kickstarter, but we'll see what we can do. So the team got to work and, did the maps and, expanded the text a bit, and we published Kiraz late last year. I think it was just the one previous to the current one, so just a couple months ago. But while we were working on that, there was a discussion on the Harn forum. So again, it's that community that's very passionate about these products. And there was mention that we were working on this, and people were like, "Oh, well, are you going to update it to be much more exciting, much more kind of fantastical than what the old one was?" And we're like, "Well, no, because the old one's canon, the old one is settled fact, and we've got to kind of stick with that." But we get what you're saying, that, what can we do to make this place more exciting? What can we do to expand on it? What can we do that will really make that whole setting someplace that you want to send your characters? So what we decided to do was that we were going to release the first part, which was kind of a revamped, slightly expanded version of the old one. That was released a couple months ago. But now we're working on part 2. So it'll be an expansion. It's not going to be a redo, but it's an expansion. It's additional parts of that kingdom/city. So it's additional parts of what's further down the tunnels that were in part 1. So Carrie's actually leading on that project now, and we're hoping that will actually be the very next Harn quest. So in Q1 of 2024, we're looking at Kiraz Part 2. That's
cool. Well, that's great. So Kiraz and Harn, when I first got Harn and I saw the carnage of Kiraz, and I thought, oh, this is clearly Moria. This is so where's the Balrog? Well, no Balrog in Kiraz, but maybe there's some in the expansion. So Carrie, I'll leave that to you. By all means, just for me, throw in some Balrogs, won't you?
We'll just put a little portal so one of the Agrican demons can step through and frighten your characters.
Exactly.
Yeah, no problem.
Exactly. That'll.
It's an army of beholders.
There you go. There you go.
Alert. Yeah. The typical Harn affair.
That's right. You're going all 5e. All 5e. No, that's not happening.
And beyond that, one of the things we've been doing over the last year or so is one of the areas one of the topic areas that people have really said is kind of missing. We've done a lot of settlements. We've done a number of the religious organizations, but there have been over the years very few guilds, very few occupation-related articles. So, Harn from day one has had like these 32 or whatever guilds that very, very brief information has been published in Harndex and the Guilds article. Some of those have been expanded greatly, like the Innkeepers article is very in-depth, and there have been a couple of other ones like that. But that's one of our projects, is we're going to expand, ideally, all of those guilds and other non-gilded occupations as well. So we put out a couple of them, the weapon crafters and the courtesans, last year. Just this year, we've put out the ostlers and the teamsters. And in the Harn Quest that is publishing right now, there are 3 additional occupation articles for the harpers, glassworkers, and ratters. and we've got more of those on the list for next year. We'll be looking to expand with more guilds and occupations. So, if you look, the what's coming is more of the same in terms of more settlements, more occupations. We've got some more religious and fighting order articles coming up. So that's what's going to be in the coming Harn quests. And I think that's something we've been touching on, but we haven't really talked about that. The primary product that Columbia Games sells is the Harn Quest subscription service. And Carrie mentioned that we put out these 32 or so pages every quarter. That's what Harn Quest is. If you subscribe, every 3 months you're going to get a shipment of the latest stuff. And subscription, being a subscriber allows you to purchase all PDFs of all the back catalog and everything at 50%. There's other benefits to subscribing. So instead of going and buying individual articles, if you subscribe to Harn Quest, you automatically get all the new stuff as it comes out, and then good access to the back stuff as well. So that's what the future Harn Quests is, just a little more of the same. Just we keep expanding all these different areas of the setting.
Right. And once again, for the viewers, where can they find all of this stuff? Anybody who's a prospective Harniac, a prospective fan of Harn, where can they find all of this stuff?
ColumbiaGames.com is where they can find all the information about subscribing and purchase things. And you can't subscribe to Harn Quest through DriveThruRPG, but you can buy individual articles as they're released through DriveThru.
Cool. All right. Well, I will put all of those links in the comments below, and I do encourage all of you guys who are interested in a very, very, very beautifully consistent, well-written and illustrated fantasy setting to go check out Harn World, because it is one of my all-time favorites for sure. Well, Brent, Carrie, Richard, thank you guys so much. I really appreciate you guys coming on and talking a little bit about how the Harn sausage is made, so to speak.
Sure. Hold on 1 second.
Uh-oh. Uh-oh.
Richard's got something to show.
Oh, no.
The one thing I would also mention is that we are continuing with the hardback Kickstarters. So those will be going throughout the next year with the goal of getting all of the kingdoms released in hardback.
Right, which is awesome. That's awesome.
That's all run directly by Columbia Games, so they are will be advertising those over the course of the next year.
Cool. All right, Richard, what do you got?
Yeah, I'm excited about the Elven Kingdom coming out, which is going to get the same treatment as Asmir had. So, but anyway,
there he is. Look at that.
Yeah.
Look at that handsome devil.
Oh, yes.
I know.
Well, that's a word.
He's up to something.
I have to tell you, it's a huge honor to be Harnfamous, to be officially part of the setting now. And ironically too, I was actually going to run a campaign set in Wulenheim. So now I have to, because I'm literally in it.
You are in it. Yeah.
I'm sure your players will be very suspicious of that fellow.
That's right.
Yeah.
Don't trust the guy. Don't trust the bard. Okay, thanks guys so much. It's been a huge pleasure, and we'll see you in Harn.